Pleased to say the great man, Ricky Ponting, joins us on SEN Tassie Breakfast this morning. G'day, Rick. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, man. How are you?
We are going very, very nicely. Thanks so much for jumping on. We really appreciate it. We'll start with the Ashes. What do you feel and how do you feel about it now? Obviously, a very good tour for Australia with the World Test Championship and then going on to retain the urn. But how did you see it all from your perspective?
Oh, I think at the end of the day, the Ashes result was probably fair enough to be fair. I think, Australia started really well. Both teams had really good chances in the first couple of Test matches to actually win, and Australia took advantage of a pretty ordinary declaration in the first Test, and then some pretty erratic batting, you'd say, in England's first innings at the Lord's Test match with that short ball sort of barrage that England couldn't cope with, and that led to Australia getting up to a 2-0 lead. Headingley was another great Test match, actually. Headingley, that England sort of got the better of the conditions and got the result they were after there. But from that moment on, England pretty much dominated the last couple of games. Manchester looked like it was heading towards a win for England, other than the 2 days of rain at the end. And then we all saw what happened at the Oval. So, the two contrasting styles of play were great to sit back and watch, actually. There was a lot of talk about Bazball and how England would approach it, and would that style stand up against the quality of the Australian attack? And looking back, it probably did. It probably had some of the Australian players and coaches and the captain at different times sort of scratching their head as to how they were going to combat it. So I think the 2-2 result, albeit probably slightly biased with a bit of controversy in that last Test match with the ball change the way that it was, that sort of gifted England some conditions that they probably shouldn't have got. I think the level of cricket played across the series, I think the 2-2 result was probably fair.
Yeah, agree, Rick. And good morning as well, mate. You touched on there from 2-0 up. I agree. I think the start of the series we were talking about how are England's Bazball batters going to handle our attack? Do you think from 2-0 up, were you surprised by the Aussies' inability, if you like, to handle in particular Wood and Wokes when they came in? The impact they had was enormous.
I think, and Paine, to be honest, England sort of stumbled across that lineup. If you think with Ollie Pope getting injured in the Lord's Test, that they ended up, keeping Moeen in the side and being able to bring Chris Wokes into the team. They were waiting for Wood to be, for them to be 100% convinced that Wood could get through the back half of that series. I'm sure they would have wanted to play him right at the start, because you can see what he adds to that team, his potency, and the way that he bowled at Headingley was as good a fast bowling as you'll see at sort of 96 miles an hour, and the seam presentation and swing that he got at Headingley was unbelievable. But you could see, even with him, that he did taper off at the back end of that series. But it wasn't so much about their bowling. I mean, Wokes is a world-class bowler. We know that. He bowls well in those conditions, and when he gets the right conditions, he's as good as anybody. It was more their top-order batting, I think, that we sort of struggled to come to grips with. The way that Crawley and Duckett were able to play at the start of every innings, really. They got England off to flying starts and put pressure straight back on the Australian attack. And then when that momentum sort of started to build, it was hard for the Australians to sort of rein it back in. So I think Zach Crawley's got to take a lot of the credit for that. I mean, he was the one that, going into the series, was the one that was under the most pressure. He'd been backed for 12 or 18 months under that regime of Stokes and McCullum, and they knew that if he played his absolute best, what he could do. And I think we saw that at the back end of the series. That 180 he got at Manchester was as good a Test match batting as you'll see. 189 of 182 balls, and had Camo and the boys sort of scratching their heads as to how they were going to bowl to him. So, I think that this whole Bazball approach, I mean, what it's all about is, with an ageing attack that they've got, they try and save as much time in a game by scoring runs quickly to give their bowlers more time to bowl opposition teams out twice, and it's worked really well. They've only had the one draw, which was a rain-affected game. Every other one's been a win, and only a couple of losses too. I think that's 19 Test matches now. So I think even the Australian boys might be sitting back and looking at the way that they played and thinking, what can we do a little bit better to combat that in the future? And I think a lot of other countries around the world might be looking at it as well and saying, well, if we want to compete with Australia, maybe this is the way we have to go. So it was great to be there and watch it and see how both teams approached it.
Yeah, you touched on there England's ageing attack. Do you think it was the first time we've seen a bit of wear and tear and possibly some ageing in our attack, which has been great for so long, and they've played so much cricket together? But do you think there was some signs in that series that, we need to start developing some guys underneath?
Oh, look, they were all pretty good, to be honest, Paine. Starkey and Camo were both outstanding, I thought. Starkey in the World Test Championship looked like he was short of a gallop, as we know, and Pat the same. Both those guys coming off not a lot of cricket, but as the series sort of wore on, Camo was probably the pick again, but Starkey was outstanding. And,
yep.
I think there were some questions about, could Pat get through, all those 6 Test matches and keep his intensity up. I think, there might have been a little bit of a flat spot when he was under a bit of an attack at Manchester, but the way he bounced back in the last Test, I mean, his pace at the start of the last Test was the best it had been for a long time. He was well up over 90 miles an hour in that last Test. So he kept coming.
Do you think we're too reliant on them though?
Boland and Neese are both sitting there. There was probably times that, Boland probably didn't have the start of the tour that he would have wanted as well. They played him in the first Test at Edgbaston on a real flat wicket. We know that Scotty needs some assistance in the wicket and in the air to be the best bowler that he can be. As it went on, it felt to me like that maybe they could have brought Neese in at some stage with the right conditions. And every time he left the camp, he went away and got a big 100 in county cricket as well. So he was in pretty good touch. But I think what they did selection wise was right. But we know that there is enough underneath these guys, and even with Morris and those sort of guys that are sort of sitting back in the wings, I think we've got enough there. And at different times, I reckon through the next 12 months, we might see some different faces in that bowling lineup.
Ricky Ponting, the great Ricky Ponting, is our guest here on SEN Tassie Breakfast this morning. Ricky, can we switch to Hurricanes mode? Obviously, you were part of the organisation last year, which was fantastic. Real Pakistani flavour to our draft. Have you looked towards the draft yet? And do you think we'll retain one of those players, or do you want to go with a fresh look? How are you thinking ahead of the draft?
Yeah, look, it was a disappointing season, to be honest, last year for us with the Hurricanes. I think, we put together what we thought was a really good playing list, and unfortunately, we just didn't get the results that we wanted to through the series. Or, missing the playoffs by that one game, obviously, which so often happens in competitions like that. You look back at it over, a long season and think just that one game here and there that we could have won would have been the difference between playing finals and not. But, we've done a lot of work with player retentions and who we've released. And you would have seen that Joel Paris and Darcy Short and guys like that are not on the Hurricanes list anymore and have found new homes. Obviously, Joel's at the Stars, and Darcy Short, who's been such an integral part of the Hurricanes for a long time now, has found a new home at the Adelaide Strikers. So we are trying to sort of freshen things up a little bit. We're really conscious of keeping a really solid spine of players together through the program. I think we've got 7 or 8 guys there that we'll look to sort of build around for the next 4 or 5 years. And the draft's only a few weeks away, actually. So we have done a fair bit of work on identifying players that we want, and we've got to obviously put those names forward to the BBL committee and get those players into the draft. And we've got to look at the gaps that we've got in our current squad and try and fill those with the best overseas players that we can. So that's all ahead of us, but there's been a lot of work gone into that already. I think that the draft nomination list will be finalised, I think, on the 27th of this month, and then the actual draft is on the 3rd of September. So a bit of work to go yet, and we'll have a clearer idea of who we can get and availability-wise, come the 27th. So it is actually really exciting. I love being a part of it last year. I mean, I watch a lot of cricket anyway, as Paine will know, and work on, obviously call a lot of the Big Bash games through the summer. But last year was a lot different for me. Every single ball that the Hurricanes boys played last year, I watched with great intent, and quite often the remote controls would be flying across the living room every now and then, because things didn't quite work out the way that I wanted. But I'm looking forward to this season again, for sure.
Rick, with the BBL draft coming up, and obviously CA has just released the first 6 names, you'd have vision on who's overall in it, I'd imagine. So those 6, I mean, we spoke about it last week. We were a bit disappointed with the star power, if you like. And so, one, are you concerned with that, having seen who's in it? And 2, are you concerned with this Dubai League and the South African League taking star players out of the Big Bash?
Yeah, Paine, I think it was a bit the same last year, wasn't it? I mean, Cricket Australia and the BBL committee did everything they could to try and attract the biggest and best names into that draft. But as you saw last year, even the bigger name players like the Russells and the Pollards and Bravos and those guys, they actually got into the draft last year because of their lack of availability, if you like. They were actually overlooked in the draft. And teams are sort of looking of not so much being able to get the best players they can for 5 or 6 games, but looking at maybe sort of getting a slightly less skilled player that you've got more availability with. So I'm not surprised. Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of other names added to that, obviously, and I'm sure released as the days go by. But yeah, with the IL T20 sort of starting on the 20th of January, it's going to mean pretty much every overseas player that any team gets that's got any quality will only play the 10 round games and then have to leave and probably won't be around for the final. So that's the juggling act that every team's going to have now. Which players do you want for those 10 games, and then what money have you got to spend after the draft to get some replacements, or do you just have to rely on your domestic talent to get you through those finals games? So there's a lot of thinking that goes into it and a lot of planning, and as I said, hopefully we can get it right on the 3rd of September.
Ricky, have you kept a close eye on the Macquarie Point Stadium debate down here in Tasmania? And two-part question, would you like to be involved some way with our AFL team?
Board member, you reckon, Breno?
Anything, yeah.
Yeah, I have kept a little eye on the debate. I mean, I haven't been home much since the start of March. I had the IPL for a couple of months, had a week at home between that and the Ashes. So I've had nearly 5 or 6 months on the road, when most of this debate has sort of been going on. Would I like to be involved with it? I think there's probably better qualified people than me to be involved with an AFL team. But look, I would never say no without thinking about it. If anyone thinks that there's something that I could add or I could give, then obviously I'm very passionate about footy. I'm very passionate about Tasmanian footy, and I think it's an unbelievable opportunity that the state has been given with the new licence. So I'm excited to see where it all goes over the next 6 or 12 months or the next couple of years, to be honest.
Now, Rick, there's something else you've been passionate about recently. It's wine. Well, I believe you're in Tassie next week. You're up in Launceston on Saturday, the 26th, for the Ponting Wines Dinner. Can you talk to us about what that is and how people could buy tickets for that?
Yeah, we've got the two wine fairs actually, Paine. So there's the wine fair up in Launceston on the 26th, which it goes from sort of 11 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, where wines from all over Tasmania and all over Australia actually are sort of there for everyone to come and taste and sample. I think it's $30 a head to get into both the Launceston and the Hobart show. The Hobart show's on the following morning on the Sunday morning at the Convention and Function Centre down in Hobart. So yeah, you turn up, pay your $30, you get your own glass, and away you go around and taste and sample as much wine as you can. So I think even someone like you would think that that's pretty good value, mate. So
I'd be there.
I reckon I'll see you on Sunday there somewhere.
Well, if you slip me a free ticket, I might come along. Brent will be probably hosting, so he'll be there.
So Saturday Arvo in Lonnie, the dinner at the casino on Saturday night, then I'll jump in the car Sunday morning and straight to Hobart and do the wine fair down there. So, look, it's 3 or 4 years now, Rihanna and I have been doing this. We started our own business, our own label, and, it's something we're really passionate about. And I think the most important thing for people to understand about this business of ours is it is our business. We're not just putting our name on someone else's wine and trying to be ambassadors for a brand. This is ours, and we work on it daily, and we're really proud of what we've been able to achieve over a short period of time. So, and with that, we've had great support from Tasmanians who have sampled the wine, and hopefully they will continue to.
Well, Ricky, it's been great to have you on the show. We look forward to seeing you down here at home next week, and thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day.
Good on you, boys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Rick.
Ricky Ponting joining us here on a SEN Tassie Breakfast.